Well, Damsel turns a classic fairy tale trope on its head, but is really far more than a mere feminist message. It's an intense and satisfying blend of Die Hard, Alien, and Dragonslayer that I really enjoyed. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my review for Damsel. The IMDb synopsis reads, "A dutiful damsel agrees to marry a handsome prince, only to find the royal family has recruited her as a sacrifice to repay an ancient debt. In this new fantasy film, a young woman who thinks she is being married to a perfect prince is thrown into a pit where she discovers she's not going to be a princess after all, but a sacrifice to appease a bloodthirsty dragon." This is all in the trailer, so it's not really spoilers. Trying to survive long enough until someone can save her, she soon realizes that no one is coming and this damsel must save herself. All right, so what is this basic animal? It gives about 30 minutes at the beginning of the movie to just set up and establish characters and relatable motives. I'm so glad they did that. The trailer didn't indicate that it would necessarily be that kind of movie, but they get into why is she agreeing to this marriage? Why is it important for Elodie is the damsel's name? Why is it important for Elodie and her family that this marriage take place? And so I was kind of feeling for them and like realizing, okay, I understand why she's feeling the need to do this, and all that setup of motives, it made the betrayal crushing, even though I knew it was coming. So I'm really grateful for the time they spent in the first 25 minutes or so doing that. Then the movie becomes this monster horror survival movie, like Alien or something else, where like someone is running for much of the movie from a monster, an alien or something like that is chasing them. Elodie is on the dragon's turf in this cavernous system trying to escape a maze with its own mysteries and dangers, in addition to the dragon toying with her and hunting her. Elodie, she starts out as respectable and substantive. So she's not like this extreme version of like going from zero to hero. But I mean, she's not like physically capable and stuff. She just has virtue and she's a mature, responsible young woman, but she also has to go on this physically painful journey of transformation in order to survive. And she is beaten down and wounded again and again. That's where the Die Hard vibe comes in. I felt the struggle that she was going through. I was leaning forward in suspense and jumping more than once at some surprise dragon attacks. So for the bulk of the movie, it's this great cat and mouse monster movie type of formula, but in a fantasy setting, which I just thought was great. The finale, it doesn't continue that formula. There is kind of a shift, but in a very satisfying way, dramatically, emotionally, so that, the bad guy gets their due, but there's also some emotional complexity to the resolution. And, there's not just white and black hats. There's a couple of shades of gray. There's more than maybe at least two characters that are wearing gray-colored hats. And so the outcome at the end of their stories, there's some emotional complexity I was feeling about it, and I really like that. Let's see here. The cast. Really, the only one I feel like I need to talk about is Millie Bobby Brown. Most people know her from Stranger Things, and also, what's that? Sherlock Holmes' sister, whatever that's, Enola Holmes. She really carries this movie a good chunk without dialogue, just quietly making her way through the cavern system trying to survive, and she really does it well. For this to work, she needs to sell me on her pain, on her struggling to endure, and she did that again and again. So very good to see that happening. The surrounding cast, I thought they were all solid, but really the movie does stand on the strength of Brown, which relies on her a lot. The visuals, the stunts, solid CG throughout, a very cool looking dragon once they eventually, they hide the monster at first like classic monster movies do, but eventually you see the dragon fully revealed, and then a number of times you see it revealed once that happens. And I really like the dragon design and the way that its neck would kind of ripple in certain ways as it was breathing or taking in a breath to get ready to blow fire. The fire effects themselves, the dragon shoots out this almost sort of lava along with fire. It's a really cool cool kind of like visual concept of the dragon overall. And so I liked the design there. There were a few shots where there's like dragon-human interactions, like a claw that's grabbing a human, that kind of thing. That's always going to be the hardest part, is marrying CG with live actors, and there were a few shots that I think could have needed some more time, along with some detectable green screen just in a few spots. But overall, I thought that the visuals, the sets, the costumes, the CG, all that kind of stuff, it was all good enough to not be taking me out of the movie more than, I mean, you can cut off one or two of my fingers and I could still count on one hand how many times I was really taken out of the movie. So that's pretty good in my book. Okay, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? You know, this does not read to me like some simplistic left-leaning feminist agenda film. And when you look at the premise on paper, it easily could have been that, depending on whose hands were guiding it. It totally could have been that. And it didn't feel like that to me. Instead, it reverses one key trope, which is a delight to see turned on its head. I always like the subversion of expectations, that kind of thing. But other than that, it mainly commits to just telling an intense monster survival story in a fantasy setting. So if you like that combination of surviving and running from a monster and figuring out how to beat it and all that kind of stuff, and you like fantasy and dragons, I think there's a pretty potent combination here that you might enjoy. The men in the movie, the key male figures, they're not bad, and they could have easily been just, they're just black hat bad and there's nothing more to them. They are deeply flawed, but the most evil character by far is a woman. So yeah, and there's also a nice model of I don't know if blended family is the right expression, but specifically a stepmother who, again, we're reversing a trope a bit here when it comes to fairy tale fantasies. This is a stepmother who's good and compassionate and loving toward her stepdaughters, who increasingly appreciate and love her in return. So that was a subtle, almost kind of background kind of trope being turned on its head, but still one that I noticed and that I thought was welcome. All right, now I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, well, watch this one for sure. I mean, it's actually worth getting Netflix for a month just on its own, especially if you watch it with your family. It's not often that you get fantasy movies made for grown-ups. I mean, this is probably for an intended audience that's a mix of grown-ups and teens maybe, but it definitely doesn't feel like this is a kid's fantasy movie or a kid's fantasy show. I feel like we get those a lot more frequently. So it's really nice to see this being made, at least in part, for a fully grown-up adult audience, and a fantasy movie that is also made well. So if this one comes to home video and Netflix just doesn't keep it stranded on their service, it'll be one that you're definitely going to add to your collection. This one is rated PG-13 for sequences of strong creature violence, action, and bloody images. And those are all of my thoughts for now on Damsel. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. Thank you to all the Spirit Blade insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/spiritblade productions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.